Today, this is an informational overview of all of the grant programs currently on offer at California Humanities as of fall 2024. You can see we have the whole crew, all of program staff, grants manager, and our operations manager, Beth Segura, on the line today. My name is Kirsten Vega. I'm a program officer here at California Humanities, and I'll just be introducing you to today's session. So we'll walk you through each of the programs discreetly and share some examples of successful projects that we've funded recently. We'll also be able to share some insights into how to craft a really strong application, as well as take your questions throughout the session. We'll have about 5 question breaks, so do use the Q&A section to let us know what's on your mind. If your question is not getting addressed, just hold tight. It might be that we'll get to that at another part of the session. And if your questions are still outstanding after the webinar, we'll share our email addresses, and we're always very happy to hear from you and be in touch. California Humanities is the State Humanities Council of California, which means that we are a nonprofit. We operate independently. However, we are in partnership with the National Endowment for the Humanities. We conduct humanities programs of our own, public panels, lectures, film screenings. We also offer grant funding every year, year-round, for public humanities projects in multiple formats. You might know us from following our newsletter. You might see us on LinkedIn or social media. Do sign up for those channels if you haven't yet. We've been around since the 1970s, and in fact, next year will be our 50th anniversary, so stay tuned. We'll have some exciting public programs next year to engage you all. As I mentioned, I'm on the line with my colleagues who represent all of our grants program areas, as well as Brett Connor, who is an expert in grants management and eligibility matters, and Beth Segura, who can help you out if you're having any technical problems. We often get questions about the public humanities. What makes the humanities public? I think one component here is your audience. Publicly engaged work tends to reach audiences in public spaces like libraries, community centers, parks, walking tours, universities, and other spaces that are designed to engage the full spectrum of a general audience, from youth to lifelong learners. These are often also projects that deal with public history or public heritage, monuments, parks. We have a mural here, but also public stories, California history that has affected a large group of people, um, public as in shared or common experiences. And these kinds of education experiences can resemble classroom learning, but often they take place outside of formal education environments. And you'll see what we mean as we give program examples. We do programs other than grants. Just briefly, we have a program called Literature in Medicine, which helps doctors, nurses, and medical staff reconnect with the patient experience by reading novels, short stories, and graphic novels about what it's like to be sick and struggling for health in reading groups. We also have California on the Ballot. A quick plug here, Beth, maybe if you have a chance, you could put a link to the Eventbrite in the chat. On October 3rd, Thursday, October 3rd, we'll be in Sacramento live at the Sacramento Public Library Galleria with California on the Ballot, our civic dialogue series. We'll have Mindy Romero from the Center for Inclusive Democracy and a panel of specialists analyzing how can California overcome its voter disillusionment. And we'll look at voting patterns throughout California's history and think about what it takes to really engage community in voting and decision-making. We also have emerging journalist fellowships for California's community college students looking to get involved in journalism and media. John heads up that program. Write to him if you're interested in learning more. And lastly, Tools of the Trade, a series of online sessions to help public humanities practitioners build their capacity to reach new audiences, get the word out, and use their humanities advisors to the best of their ability. And finally, we come to the grant programs we'll be discussing today, and I'll pass you over to Brett Connor, who will give you some key terms.
Thanks, Kirsten. You did a good job giving an overview of California Humanities, and now let's dig into some very specific details. First of all, I'm going to start with some key terms that you will hear us refer to in our verbiage, as well as you will see on any of our guidelines documents, our frequently asked questions, our webpage. So I want to make sure everybody's on the same page here. The project director is the person, part of the application, that is responsible for executing the project. The authorizing official is the person at the organization who can sign off on application materials, saying that yes, all of these materials are true, all of the information you have provided about our organization is accurate, and if you are indeed chosen to be granted from us, that person will also need to be able to sign a legally binding grant agreement. Most of our programs require at least one or more humanities advisors. A humanities advisor is really an expert in their field, whatever it may be, and will help you connect whatever the focus is or the topic of your particular program into the greater scheme of things as the humanities exists. A fiscal sponsor is an organization, a 501c3 organization that will help you sponsor your project if you are not a 501c3 yourself. So if your organization is not a federally recognized 501c3 nonprofit organization, or if you are an independent humanities practitioner, culture bearer, artist, you want to execute this project on your own, but you're not necessarily affiliated with a specific organization, you will need to use a fiscal sponsor to apply on your behalf. If that situation does apply to you, then you are the subrecipient. So that independent practitioner or that organization that doesn't have nonprofit status from a legal standpoint, that is the subrecipient. Most of our grant programs also require matching funds. Those that do require a one-to-one matching fund, or some put it a 100% matching fund. So for instance, what that means is if we give you a grant for $10,000, you will also need to come up with $10,000 from somewhere else, from donations, from your own company's line items, from in-kind goods and services. Probably out of the scope of this particular webinar today, but if you attend one of our application webinars specific to quick grants or project grants or California Documentary Project, we'll talk about what the matching funds mean for that particular grant line. Next, we're going to talk about who can apply. So we're getting further into the nitty-gritty here. So California Humanities can accept applications from nonprofit organizations, local or state government entities, public universities, libraries, museums, tribal governments. If you are a nonprofit, you have to have that 501c3 federal status. You need to be registered with the state of California as a nonprofit that operates in that state. The only exception to that is if you are applying for California Documentary Project. So if you are an organization that applies with us, you must be located within the state of California, except for CDP, which is California Documentary Project. Like I said on the last slide, if you are an individual, you must apply under the auspices of a fiscal sponsor. Applicants must not have an active grant or a pending application with us at the time. This does not apply to colleges and universities, and it does not apply to those organizations who have a multi-project fiscal sponsor status with us. Though you know who you are. If you don't know what that means, it most likely does not apply to you. Or applicant organizations, as well as applying project directors, must be in good standing with us, meaning that if you've had a grant with us in the past, you must have been able to complete that grant completely, as well as turn in all reporting materials. And then organizations and project directors that have been previously awarded a Humanities for All grant with us, if you have had one in the past, you do need to have a 12-month waiting period before you can apply again. The next slide just shows a snippet of our webpage. So if you were to go to calhum.org and you click on the red tab that says funding opportunities, that's just going to give you a nice little grid, what we call grants at a glance. So it will talk about each of our grant programs. It'll tell you when the deadline is. It will tell you the features of that program, specifically the amounts that will be offered, who the contact person is, etc. So we're going to focus on our kind of 3 or 4 major grant lines today. So that being said, we're kind of at an overview point right now before we dig into the nitty-gritty of each program. But if anybody has any general questions, this is a great time to enter them into the Q&A box. Myself, as well as my program officers, as we're talking throughout this morning, will be able to answer some of those questions live. And like Kirsten noted at the beginning, if we see a question now, let's say for California Documentary Project, which we'll get to in maybe 20 minutes, don't be disappointed if I hold on to your question or if I don't answer it right away. We'll kind of filter these questions into the right part of this presentation. If you have any questions about eligibility, go ahead and put them in now, and I'll answer those in the few minutes here. And now I'm going to pass it on to Felicia.
Okay, thanks, Brett. And hi again, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. And it's great to have so many new people on this session. So thanks so much. Okay, I'm going to start off by talking about our Humanities for All suite of programs. Since 2016, actually, both Quick Grants and Project Grants have supported a wide range of locally initiated public humanities projects of many kinds that engage people in all parts of California and all walks of life in humanities-centered learning experiences that do a couple of key things. So as Kirsten said, we're very interested in, if we can just go back for a second, if we can go back, we want to reach people in California outside of the formal educational system, in addition to, of course, programs that are university and school-based. We want to support projects that employ the humanities to promote understanding, empathy, knowledge, and insight in keeping with our overall mission statement. We want to support projects that are responsive to the needs, interests, and circumstances of California's diverse communities. We want to support projects that engage new and underserved audiences or constituencies. That's a paramount concern. So make sure that your project, does that. And finally, we want to support work that really increases access to the humanities by minimizing barriers to participation of any type, whether it's cost, scheduling, programming formats, language, or removing barriers to folks with physical or other types of disabilities. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we funded hundreds and hundreds of projects over the last 8 years. So we can't, go into depth about all of these, but here are a couple of, pretty common features that stand out that are actually, frequent or common to most of the projects that we fund. First of all is this emphasis on participatory programming. So we really want to fund projects that actively engage folks in, participating in learning experiences, whether it's community conversations, community-wide reads or film screenings and discussion series, or actually projects that help to create a kind of citizen humanist activity by actually engaging folks in knowledge production and dissemination. Many of the projects we fund have a strong interpretive focus. That is, they provide perspective, deeper context, a variety of points of view about a particular subject or topic or historical event or range of experiences. So this could be done through exhibits, many types. We fund a lot of exhibits with accompanying public programs, again, opportunities for people to engage actively. Things like lectures, presentations, and performances that also provide, a deeper layer of contextualization, interpretation to promote deeper understanding and awareness about the historical or cultural context of an art form, for example. And finally, we support a lot of narrative-based work. So projects that explore stories and narratives of many kinds, whether these are literary, filmic, historical narratives, deep or broad cultural narratives. So there's a lot of possibilities out there for narrative-based work, as well as more literally narrative work that involves oral history programming, story collection and sharing, memoir writing, zine making, community documentary making, anything that involves community members in recording and sharing their stories about life in California. Okay, so as Kirsten said, we've recently made some changes to both of these programs to increase accessibility and lessen the burden on applicants. So with quick grants, 1-year project duration, awards from $1,000 to $5,000. No match is required. And we've recently instituted or done away with our 3 deadline per year policy, and we now accept applications anytime. They're reviewed on a rolling basis, and it's about a 10-week review process. One thing that you should note is that we have instituted a cap on organizational budgets. So if your organization exceeds the $500,000 annual budget mark, then unfortunately you will not be eligible to apply for a quick grant. But in that case, and in any case, you should also consider the project grant mechanism. These are for more complicated projects of up to 2-year duration. Maximum award is $25,000. We do require at least a 1-to-1 match, either cash or in kind, as Brett described. And we have 2 grant rounds a year. We're right now in the middle of the review process for our July deadline. Those awards will be made public in December, and we'll have another deadline in January. And we've also made some changes here. We've gone to a 2-stage process. Initially, you submit a very brief letter of intent describing the scope of your activities and the purpose and focus of your project. And then on the basis of that, a subset of those applications will be invited to submit a full proposal. So we've really done this to lessen at least the initial burden on applicants and really encourage more organizations and projects to consider applying. Okay, so just now a couple of quick examples. First, a project grant, the bigger grants, the multi-year grant. So this one called More Than Cars, Celebrating Lowrider Culture, was sponsored by Watsonville Film Festival, conducted a 3-month series of really amazing cultural programs this spring in partnership with the Pajaro Valley Arts Council and local car clubs that engaged over 10,000 people. Our grant enabled WFF to explore the creative legacy of low riding through a series of film screenings, talks by filmmakers, an oral history project that engaged a local high school as well as students at Cal State University Monterey Bay, school visits from a mobile exhibition, and a broader exhibit that featured artwork contributed by more than 50 local artists and members of 5 car clubs. So really, really exciting and engaging project. So example of a quick grant, and this will kind of show you the difference in scale between project grants and quick grants. This was a one-day event, a public reading of work from San Diego Writers Inc.'s AAPI writing workshop that aimed to combat the marginalization and exclusion of Asian American writers. So this was conducted in tandem with AAPI Heritage Month in May, and it was a public reading by these writers, followed by a panel discussion facilitated by a knowledgeable person that provided an opportunity for the public to engage with these writers, ask them questions, as well as, network with them about literary production and possibilities for collaboration within the writing community in San Diego. Okay.
All right, thank you, Felicia. We have a couple of general questions that, as well as that relate to Humanities for All for right now. First of all, and this is a question we get all the time, how do you qualify a humanities expert?
Well, there's a very detailed list in our FAQs, and I can't really spend too much time here, but as Brett said, the primary thing is that your humanities expert should be knowledgeable about the field or the subject matter that is the focus of your project. So humanities expert can be a scholar, a teacher, an educator, a librarian, archivist, researcher, documentary filmmakers, journalists, all kinds of people qualify, as well as community culture bearers. So folks who really carry with them or embody a tradition of knowledge or wisdom, whether it's tribal heritage or the knowledge related to a particular occupational group or anything, a neighborhood, anything of that nature. They don't have to be a credentialed academic scholar.
All right, and I have an eligibility question at all. Jennifer has a film preservation project that are all foreign films and that are historically important to preserve, but they are not necessarily California-centric in content. Would that sort of project qualify for a grant? I'll start by saying that there has to be public humanities programming that goes along with it, not just the film preservation project. You would need to present those films and have discussions and presentations or whatnot. Does anybody else want to add to that?
I just say that we don't fund preservation per se. So those you might look at NEH for support of a project like that, or even the state of California has grants for archiving and preservation. But yeah, as Brett said, to make it eligible for Humanities for All, there would have to be, primary emphasis on public facing screenings, discussions, things like that.
We do from time to time fund programs that have community members preserving their own history, family photos, videos with the help of librarians or community centers, but usually that's part of a bigger oral history project that includes live public programs.
All right, thanks everyone. There's a couple of easy ones that just popped in that I'll just answer in the chat, but now I'll invite John to come talk about the CDP project.
All right, thanks, Brett. Appreciate that. Hi, everybody. I'm John Lightfoot, Director of Media and Journalism Programs at California Humanities, and I have managed the California Documentary Project for some time, and so I've seen a lot of things over the years. And I'll try and in this brief section talk a little bit about some of what tends to work best in terms of competitiveness for this program, but also want to flag that we will have a CDP, California Documentary Project specific webinar, applicant webinar on September 17th. If people want more detail, you're welcome to sign up for that. So as an introduction to the suite of media-based programs, CDP is a competitive grant program that supports documentary film, audio, and interactive media projects about California subjects and issues. We like to call this, California stories, national audiences. And part of the intent here is to bring these California stories beyond, the immediate audiences or constituents that might be aware and understanding of it. So it's bringing sort of essential California stories to national audiences to raise awareness, deepen understanding, and broaden perspective. Projects use the humanities to provide context, depth, and perspective. And as I've said, already have the potential to reach statewide and national audiences through multiple platforms and media. So broadcast is great, podcast is great, but so are community screenings on the ground, grassroots screenings, educational screenings, distribution like that. I want to emphasize that we're open to pretty much any format that you're working in. And so that could be short films, it could be feature-length films, podcasts, audio-based documentaries, interactive media, virtual reality, whatever it might be. We're also open to pretty much all subject matter. It's really more about how you contextualize and frame the subject matter using the humanities and articulate how it will be of relevance to audiences far and wide. In terms of basic details, I guess we've covered most of this slide, so the next slide. In terms of basic details, we're currently offering two grant categories, research and development and production. Research and development grants are up to $15,000. They require that one-to-one match that's already been referenced and require at least 2 humanities advisors. The deadline for both are November 4th, the Monday. We usually have our deadlines around November 1st. And since the first fell on a Friday, we are having it on a Monday instead so that people have a weekend to wrap up their applications. Production grants are up to $50,000. Similarly, one-to-one match is required. Also requires the same humanities advisors and also due November 4th. There's a little bit of gray area and overlap between these two. And that's a very common question for people to ask, which should I apply to based on where my project is now? And there's no absolute rule, but generally speaking, if you've got a work sample, some sort of media that you've already produced for the proposed project that demonstrates to the degree you'd like it to, the style, approach, the substance, then you would apply for the production grant. If you don't have that, you really do need to apply for the research and development. Ideally, the research and development is a feeder program for the production grant, but you're not guaranteed to receive a production grant if you've received R&D. One quick, maybe just a couple of quick comments also about this, just to put a little more perspective on it. So as you've heard, we're a public humanities organization, not a media organization. That said, we've supported media for many years, in part as a means to reach and engage audiences within California and beyond as an organization with a pretty small budget and a pretty small staff. So it's an efficient way of surfacing new histories, new stories, new content, and disseminating it far and wide, but also so people can engage with it through, again, community screenings, things like that. So it's a longstanding tradition at California Humanities, and I think we've supported some pretty great projects over the years. Next slide, please. And one of the first things I recommend people do is look at that list of projects that have been supported recently to get a sense of the range and scope and scale of the subjects and projects that we've proposed. We typically are an early funder, so our funding is meant to be catalytic to really help the project get to the next stage. I'm going to highlight a couple examples right here, I think, that are good illustrations of the sort of projects we're looking for and the type of work we want to support. We receive a lot of submissions and it's pretty competitive, but we want to emphasize that we're really interested in supporting stories and projects from communities, regions, and individuals whose voices and perspectives have traditionally not been included from the broader California narrative. In particular, we have a focus and an emphasis and an encouragement of projects that highlight Indigenous and Native American experiences in California. So as an example, I'm showing you this image from a film called Good Fire by director Ronnie Joe Draper that looks at traditional fire practices among Northern California indigenous communities as a means to inform how other fire practices could be conducted. And this is a project that's in progress. I think it should probably premiere in a year or so. But again, we are deeply and strongly encouraging of projects that are dealing with indigenous and Native American subject matter in California. And then an example of a project that just has succeeded on so many levels is a film called Chinatown Rising by Harry Chuck and Josh Chuck. And this is a documentary film that uses archival footage and photographs to tell the story of San Francisco's Chinatown as it transitions over a 3-generation period. The film focuses on the Asian American movement of the 1970s and includes interviews with activists from the 60s who reflect on their experiences as young residents fighting for tenants' rights and bilingual education. This is a story that had not been broadly told in mass media, mass culture, and this project has, in addition to receiving a national broadcast on public television, has done a really exemplary job bringing the project to audiences who might not see it otherwise, and that's through campus screenings, it's through community screenings, and it's also through participatory interactive projects such as hosting walking tours and film screenings throughout San Francisco's Chinatown. So really a great example of a project that is maximizing its reach to not just film festival audiences and broadcast audiences, but to community members, both within the community itself of San Francisco Chinatown, but beyond. And I will stop there.
All right, thanks, John. We have a couple of good questions here. Let's see here. First of all, for a CDP project, is it more compelling to have your fiscal sponsor be an academic institution, or is it fine to have a nonprofit cultural organization?
So it really depends on the project you're working on, but fiscal sponsors are important and they can't be purely pass-throughs. They have to be genuinely involved with administering financially, but also somehow logistically the project itself. So if that's the case and either of those two organizations will do that better than the other one, I would steer that direction. Fiscal sponsorship is a really it's a pretty complicated subject, and so I can't go into detail on that here, but I just encourage you to do your research and know exactly what you're looking for and what you're expecting from that organization, and to have an agreement in writing.
Yeah, and I'll just add from an administrative standpoint, many people find that applying through a university is lots of red tape to go through their grants and sponsored projects office. And for sure, a university will take a 10% cut off of your grant. If you use a smaller nonprofit organization, they might not take that big of a fee. So those are other things that you might consider.
I'd add one other point to that, and thanks for clarifying that, Brett, is that one of the things we look at with a fiscal sponsor is capacity. So if it's an all volunteer run nonprofit somewhere, it's not a deal breaker, but it's something that we might have some questions about. So sometimes it makes sense to look for organizations with robust and established fiscal sponsorship programs. And get on that now because it takes a little bit of time.
Christopher asks, if we have a project documenting our process, moving to a small village in Mexico, let's see, the filming will be outside of California, but if it is screened within California, would that still be eligible?
No, it really has to have something of a dedicated footprint, or whatever the term would be, of some sort of connection to California. It doesn't need to be exclusively Californian. And so we see on many projects that have one section that is about a California component to a national story. That's totally fine. But it really is about the subject matter. It's not about not where the filmmaking team lives or the production team lives. It's not where the fiscal sponsor is. It's subject matter.
Thanks for that. And these next two questions, the folks asked these specifically about CDP, but they actually they actually pertain to all of our grant programs. So the first one is, do humanities advisors have to be individuals from outside the organization's staff? And this is a common question that we get every time. And my response to this is always, no, they don't have to be outside of your staff, but why wouldn't you want those outsider point of views?
Right.
So it would be beneficial in my mind to go outside of your organization. Is there anything you want to add to that, John?
Well, yeah, just a little bit. No, absolutely. What you said is totally accurate. But I'd add just like if the idea of these advisors is to broaden perspective and help you further understand your subject, as Brett says, it would just make sense to have, somebody who maybe sees the subject from a slightly different perspective. But there's no absolute rule about it. You present with what you think is the most, I don't know, the best the best configuration for your project. But I do think advisors are very important, so think about them carefully. And I will say with CDP in particular, other documentary filmmakers do not make good humanities advisors unless they're advising about ethics and representation and things like that. Not necessarily as production advisors, but I would emphasize how important culture bearers are. So people with community connections, particularly if you're not of that community. I'd say that's just an essential component. And what we mean by community could mean many things, but think about somebody who has some lived experience with the subject to provide a really genuine first-person perspective.
And remember, this applies to not just CDP, but across all of our programs. The last question I'll do for right now is for matching funds, can they come from outside of the US?
That's a good question. I would be inclined to say no, but I don't know for certain.
Yeah, I don't know for certain either. The only thing, the thing I do know is they can't be, you can't use federally, you can't use other federal funds because our funds are federal. So you can't match it from another federal source. Let's say you got an NEH grant or an NEA grant or some other federal source. You could not use federal. But we'll have to get back to you on the foreign funds.
Can I just add, my sense is that if the idea is to match federal funds with non-federal funds, then it seems like it has to be in the US dollar.
All right, we'll go to the next section.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Hi again. Okay, so quickly, just want to talk about Library Innovation Lab. Kirsten, you helped me out with this too. This program is now in its 8th year. It launched in 2017. And basically, this program provides a learn by doing professional development experience every year to a cohort of programming librarians and other library professionals as they research, plan, implement, and assess a new public humanities program in their community aimed at engaging immigrants. Participants, these are again professional librarians, develop skills, gain confidence, make connections within their communities and with colleagues across the state. And all of this is supported by a cash grant to each participating library to provide some risk capital for experimenting with innovative programming.
We see Library Innovation Lab programs look a lot of different ways. We've seen story hours with immigrants sharing experiences from their lives. We see karaoke programs, live music, performance, but always with an interpretive cultural element. The wonderful thing about these programs is maybe you've seen, cultural dance at your local library, but rarely do you see the dancers sit down, talk about how they learned to dance the way they do, what growing up was like, what their, elders taught them. These programs add that extra layer, I think, of storytelling and personal connection. Also, workshops, writing workshops, lectures, community history, academic history. We see a lot of wonderful family programs get funded through this grant, including festivals, parades, lantern making, crafting. You can see a lot of examples if you check out our calendar right now. The Library Innovation Lab group is actively programming with author visits, story hours, much, much more, film screenings. So I would say visit the calhum.org calendar. Beth, maybe you could put a link into the chat and people can see some of the great library events going on right now.
Yeah, okay, so just some very nitty-gritty details. This is an annual program. Our next deadline will be either late this year or early next year. We're still working out the details, in part because we just received, in partnership with Khalifa Group, an IMLS award to expand this program to national scope. So we're very excited about that. This next year, we will be involving libraries from other parts of the nation as well as California. But again, this program is limited to public libraries and library serving organizations such as Friends groups or other professional library organizations.
Yes, that's exciting. Oh, we don't have a question page between these two programs, so I'm just going to move into one more feature, Civics and Humanities middle grades grants, and then we'll catch up with a question break afterward. So one last grant program on our roster today is our newest grant program. This is Civics and Humanities Middle Grades Grants. This is a pilot program now entering its third year that supports educators across California who want to inspire and engage middle school students in taking part in civic life in their communities. The projects come in two shapes. There are planners and implementers. Planners are usually looking to spend about a year working with a team of educators and humanities experts, and often students are advisors on these projects too, planning a project somewhere in California that's going to have an impact on how middle schoolers engage with civic life. These awards are $5,000, no match required, and we offer them once a year. The implementation grant is a larger grant. You can request $7,000 to $15,000 in a year and a half's time to implement a project. This does not need to be a new project. This could be, in an example I'll give in a moment, an ongoing learning program for middle school students with their city government that you've done before, but you're ready to innovate or ready to implement with a new class or a new school. It can also be a project that's just launching for the first time and is aiming to have an impact on students' understanding of democracy, of their own role in their community, of their ability to make and affect change where they live or where they study. In our experience, the term civic can be defined rather broadly, but always there's this element of students having an ability to affect change and understand how systems and decisions are made in their lives and in their communities. This grant too, implementation is offered once a year. We're currently looking ahead to our next deadline. Traditionally, it's been in February, but we'll be announcing in the next few months what the new deadline will be, so stay tuned. A couple quick spotlights. This is Do You Know the Way to San Jose? This is a planning project that seeks to utilize the wonderful Preservation Park complex in San Jose, collection of historic buildings telling histories of San Jose, and engage middle school students in creating podcasts about different ways that people have come to San Jose throughout time, and at times reflecting on how their own family came to San Jose, tying into these older narratives, their own. This is a project that's been in the planning stage this year. We're very excited to see what happens next. An implementation grantee from this last cohort was the San Diego, it's now called the Future Civic Leaders Internship. The city of San Diego actually has an internship program for middle school students who have been through foster care or experienced homelessness and are interested in having a career at City Hall. So this program brings them to fire stations and parks services and all of the different elements of City Hall, introduces them around, gives them work and projects to do, and then once they're 16, they're invited to come back and apply for a paid job opportunity. I will say this program also compensates students for their time and gives them a wardrobe of professional clothing that they can use to apply for city jobs and work their way into positions of leadership in their cities and towns. Wonderful program. We'll be spotlighting it on the blog soon, so keep an eye out. Okay, we're a little short on time, but maybe we could just take a moment and see if there are any Library Innovation Lab or Civics and Humanities question.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Emma, for this nice comment. Glad you appreciate the middle school program. Okay, on to you, Brett.
All right, how to apply. At the top of our webpage, that you'll see that banner at the very top of this slide is what the very top of our webpage looks like. Hit the word grant portal. That will take you to the entrance to the grant portal, which is hosted on SurveyMonkey Apply. If you have applied with us in the past, use your same username and password, or hit register to set it up. Most of our grant programs require all the same contents, although they may be in different forms. So there's usually an application form, a web form, fill in the blank, add your address and your phone number, tell us about your organization, tell us about you, kind of stuff. A proposal narrative, that could be either uploading a Word doc, uploading a PDF, or just writing paragraphs online in a web form, depending on what program we're talking about. Project budget and project narrative. Again, depending on the program, it could be very easy summarized information that we're asking you. And then in our bigger grant lines, we'll be asking you for a full Excel template of detailed budget information. And then your application contents, of course, must be certified by the authorizing official at your organization. Sometimes we ask for media samples, prior work, current work, timelines of activities, and if you are a fiscally sponsored project, we will ask you to attach your memo of understanding, MOU, or your fiscal sponsorship agreement, whatever terminology you use with your organization. So how can we support you? Please make use of all of the resources that we offer. So obviously you're here today. Great, that's a great step. We record these and you can always watch them on our YouTube later if you miss it. We always use an FAQ document with every grant line so that you can look up frequently asked questions. We give you a sample, or it's located on our website rather, a sample of a funded proposal so you can get a glimpse of what a really good proposal looks like that ended up being funded. We do provide one-to-one support with our program officers. For Kirsten, Felicia, or John, you can book time with them for a half-hour phone call. And you can also use our Tools of the Trade video bank. And I believe that is on our YouTube. And if Beth has a minute, maybe she can put the link to the Tools of the Trade in there as well. Let's see, what is next? Application tips. Is this me or John? Let's see.
I can grab it if you want me to. Okay.
Go for it.
So these are just some basic rules of thumb to pay attention to when you're applying to us. So first and foremost, just make sure your project is a good fit with our funding priorities. It is not uncommon for us to see proposals that seem like they're just kind of sent in without having read guidelines or FAQs. So really just make sure it's a good fit. It takes a lot of time on your end. It takes a lot of time on our end. We want to support the most competitive projects possible, and we're not trying to discourage you from applying, but it's not worth necessarily twisting yourself into a pretzel to apply. Please follow the guidelines and respond to all the requested information using the appropriate format and templates if we've provided them. For us to have as level a playing field as possible, we ask people to use the same standardized templates so that we can compare projects. It's just a practical feature, but also makes it much easier for us to assess what you're proposing. We do encourage you to review, edit, and proof your narrative, recheck your budget calculations, and then have somebody else take a look at those things who may or may not be as familiar with the subject as you are. One of the most common errors, I think, at least I see in the California Documentary Project, is that people take for granted that everybody reading the proposal will have the same level of knowledge and understanding as you do. So err on the side of over-explaining. And if something doesn't make sense to the person you have reviewing it, take the time to explain it in your narrative. Common sense, but make sure your submission package is complete. There's a button at the very end that requires hitting, and it's actually the submit button, which makes a lot of sense, but people seem to miss that for some reason quite often. So just make sure it's complete, then hit submit. And finally, just don't leave stuff to the last minute. All of us are on call the day before the deadline, and we can't help you if you're calling us a half hour before the deadline. And those deadlines are firm right on the hour, so.
All right, thanks, John. These are tips, not just for applying with California Humanities, but applying to anywhere, all right? Because we as grant managers and grant makers, we verify a whole bunch of information once we receive your application. So first of all, make sure the applicant organization, make sure your organization's basic information is very easily verified and identifiable. For instance, put the organization's, make sure it's the address and phone is listed on the website. Put your federal tax ID on your website. Many nonprofits fear that, placing that on their tax number on their website is unsafe and could be stolen, but it doesn't matter really. A nonprofit's EIN or federal tax ID is public knowledge, and anybody can look it up anywhere. So it's just a quick, easy thing you can do for grant makers like us to verify that you really are who you are. And for those 501c3s, ensure that your organization's profile on sites such as Candid's Guide Star and Charity Navigator is up to date. Those are two online databases that all grant makers across the country use every single day to verify your organization's information, to make sure you're eligible, to make sure that you're not, delinquent on anything, or your ID's been suspended or anything crazy like that. It does, and it can happen. So if you go to your, whether it's a grants manager at your organization or a development director or whoever that person is, that is the best person to make sure that your Guide Star profile or your Charity Navigator profile is up to date. Encourage them to do that. Next is what happens after applying. So like I kind of just ran through a couple of things that we check from an administrative perspective, and then your proposal will be reviewed according to the quality and capacity that is listed in each program's guidelines section. There'll be a very clear section that calls out the different things that we will specifically be looking for inside your proposal. It's usually a multi-stage review. We have peer reviewers, which are, other humanities practitioners from the field across the state of California. We use our own board members, our own staff members that are educated in these types of programming. The degree of competitiveness varies by program. It can be anywhere from 10 to 15% funding rate, depending on what year it is, how much budget we have, how many applications we get. So that's a pretty round number. And then notification and awards. Your guidelines document will always spell this out. It will give you a very detailed timeline of when applications are accepted, when they're due, when they'll be reviewed, when you'll receive a notification. If you do get awarded, when the grant period will be. All those dates are in each guidelines. All of our announcements are sent by email, whether you have been awarded or whether you have been declined. They will be sent by email. You will have options obtaining reviewer comments, whether you email them from us, whether you view them right in the system, depending on the grant line, those will be made available to you. If you are declined, revised applications are absolutely welcome. And also the schedule of disbursement of funds varies by program as well. Some might be a lump sum at the beginning. Some might be divided into 2 or 3 payments throughout the grant cycle. What makes a proposal stand out? I think I'll let some of the program officers talk through that.
Yeah, colleagues, definitely chime in on this, but let's just go over some of the things that makes an application stand out. And first and foremost, across the board, as a public humanities organization, that the humanities are central and really not tacked on as we sometimes see, maybe for a performing arts project, but really the humanities as it relates to providing context and encouraging a range of perspectives and broadening perspective is really central to it. The public access really is a priority as well, meaning that these are meant to reach and engage broad audiences, a broad range of audiences. And particularly for HFA, humanities for all, this question of community interests and audiences and being responsive to the community's needs and not just sort of stating what, you know, the project will be about, but actually taking in some information to help shape and form the project is extremely important. And please, Felicia, Kirsten, chime in at any point. But also one of the things we look for that projects are, as it says, ambitious but realistic. I mean, we want projects that will be helping, if it's coming from an organization, perhaps help you do something new or in a new way. It doesn't have to be that, but it really is there's meant to be some growth there. But really want to underscore the word realistic, because we know we are not always the full funder, we're often a partial funder. But just being able to make sure you can do the project in the way that you've proposed it based on the finances available. For CDP, that potential to reach and engage both statewide and national audiences is good. So if you're working on a hyper-local project, you really need to explain how this will be of relevance to someone in another part of the country. We look for budgets that are also sound and reasonable, meaning they're scaled and with dollar amounts allocated to those essential things that mean that you can actually complete the project as proposed. That the project team has the needed capacity, that they're the right people on board to help you, not just referring to CDP here in particular, not just the creative personnel, but also those folks who will provide legitimacy and access to a community if it's not your own. And that's particularly the last bullet point there, that the proposal demonstrates commitment to the project, the partners and community, and that there's a genuine relationship either to be developed or in place already.
All right, so if you are granted, what is required of you? So you will need to return a signed grant agreement. That's all done electronically. We will schedule an orientation session where you will talk to us, the team at California Humanities. You'll meet other people in your cohort and learn about what requirements exist for your specific grant. If you have changes to your proposal, we'll ask for advance approval of that. We will need for you to acknowledge California Humanities and the NEH in any of your live programs, recorded programs, and publicity, any marketing materials and flyers and such like that. You'll inform us of project activities and events, and that's really to help you market your events to others. You'll need to track your progress through the budget goals. We'll ask you, some grants require an interim report. All grants will require a final report. We talked about matching contributions. All matching contributions are required everywhere except for quick grants. And including in your final report, we love to see video clips and photos, promotional materials. We'll ask you to send thank you letters to your elected officials, which help us continue to secure our funding at the federal level, as well as continue to ask for funding at the state level. And if for whatever reason, the funds from California Humanities are not spent by the end of your grant period, we'll ask you for a refund of the balance, but that happens in very few cases. In most cases, you'll send us a final budget report that shows that you've spent every penny, and I'm sure you will spend more than every penny that we have to offer. But I think that wraps it up for requirements. Oh no, there's one more screen. So we ask you to monitor your progress, keep track. Like for instance, you're gonna keep track of the types of events you have, keep track of your attendance, keep tracks of how is it accomplishing your outcome? Is this accomplishing your goals? What was the impact of this project to your community, to your staff, to your project team? Yeah, I think I covered everything else. So here is how to contact us. Each of our staff members here on the call today, it shows you which programs we manage or what topics that you can email us about. And if you don't have time to write any of these down, you can always email info@calhum.org or grants@calhum.org, and we will get you to the right person.
Thanks everyone for your time today. We can stick around for a few more minutes. If you have questions, just put them in the Q&A. We'll also be sending you a follow-up email with this information and the slide deck. And a recording. We're recording. I don't know if I mentioned that. Oh, thank you, Beth, for launching this poll. Let us know, how likely are you to apply after viewing the webinar? We hope you'll feel encouraged not only to apply, but to reach out to us with any questions. Okay. Irma, I see your hand is raised. If you can type your question into the Q&A, we can answer it there. Okay, well, I think we'll just say goodbye then, and thank you everyone so much for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.